Welcome all to accessiBe's Spotlight Sessions, where we shine a light on incredible individuals and organizations and the work that they do. I am your host, Josh Basil. I'm a C4-5 quadriplegic, paralyzed below my shoulders, and a power wheelchair user. I'm the Community Relations Manager here at accessiBe and a passionate disability rights advocate and attorney focused on breaking down barriers to access and inclusion for people with disabilities. Today on accessiBe Spotlight Sessions, we're joined by Congressman James Langevin, the U.S. Representative for Rhode Island's 2nd Congressional District and the first quadriplegic to serve in Congress. Welcome, Congressman Langevin.
Josh, thank you for having me on. Great to be with you today. Good to see you again.
You as well. I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today and to share more about you. So let's jump right into it. Please tell our audience a little bit more about your disability journey and how you got into a career of public service.
Sure. Well, before I do that, let me just say how impressed I am with you and all that you've accomplished. I remember when you were an intern for then Representative, now Senator Ben Cardin, and you came by my office. We had a nice meeting in my office, and you were telling me about your future aspirations, including going to law school and perhaps getting into politics yourself someday. Well, clearly you have it met and exceeded the bar on a number of levels, and including passing the bar, becoming a practicing attorney, and also a new dad. So congratulations on all your success and letting nothing get in your way. I admire your courage and your perseverance as well. So kudos.
Thank you so much.
I've had certainly an interesting journey myself as well, and I didn't originally intend to get into politics in terms of running for elective office. My journey it started early on in the law enforcement career and path. When I was a teenager, I got involved in a Explorer Scout program, police cadets in the local police department in Warwick, Rhode Island, where I live, and really fell in love with law enforcement. Took classes from January to June, and then in June we would take a test, and the top 10 high scorers got jobs for the summer. I was doing that program for about 4 years, and in my fourth year, in the summertime, it was in August of 1980, I was in the locker room of the police station, getting ready to go on my shift. Two officers looking at a new weapon that one of them had purchased, and unfortunately, the officer who was examining the weapon didn't realize it was loaded. He pulled the trigger to test it. The gun went off, and the bullet went through my neck and unfortunately severed my spinal cord. So I've been paralyzed ever since. So I'm a about a C5-6 quadriplegic, and obviously it changes your life dramatically, and that was a tragic moment in my life, forever altered my life. But I was so fortunate to have an amazing family that rallied around me at a time, and a community that rallied around my family and I at a time when we really needed it the most. And that rallying of support had a profound impact on me and my view of the world. And I saw what could happen when people had this like-minded determination to make a difference in someone's life. And I said, if there was ever something that I could ever do to give back, I would want to do that. And one thing led to another, and I had to let go of my dream of becoming a police officer, maybe an FBI agent someday, is what I had hoped. As I let go of that dream, I had to develop new dreams and goals. And getting involved in government, I saw as a way of giving back. And I eventually ran for public office and was successful back in 1984, 1985 timeframe when I was elected as a delegate to our constitutional convention. And the rest is kind of history from there. State rep, Secretary of State, and now I've been serving in Congress for the last 22 years, and it's been an incredible privilege to serve. But it started as a journey, as a way to give back.
I'm always in awe of all that you've accomplished and that you've done for people with disabilities and people without disabilities, all the people that you serve in Rhode Island, and it's amazing what you've really been able to do to change lives. And I'd love to know, I bet you a lot of our audience wants to know, what does the day-to-day look like for a congressman?
Yeah, good question. And I get that question asked a lot. Well, I'll start off by saying there is no one day that's like the other. It's usually fast paced, and you're jamming 10 pounds worth of stuff in a 5 pound bag, if you will. And it's a lot of times it's rapid fire, uh, and so it's hard to be on time for everything. Um, since you're going from thing to thing very often. But basically, I break it down into two categories. First, in the district, that's where I have my caseworkers, or I do my site visits, constituent meetings. People coming into the office, or me going out into the community and meeting with business owners, community leaders, nonprofit organizations, state, local government officials, and just getting to really understand what's happening in my community, so I can be a more effective voice and vote for the people of Rhode Island's second congressional district in Washington. So that's where the kind of the rubber meets the road in the district. That's where you do a lot of constituent service work. We are solving real world problems that people are having with government. And I often tell my people, look, when people come to our office looking for help, it's because they've tried everything else on their own, and they're hitting a roadblock. And our job is to cut through government red tape and try to solve their problems for them. So constituent services here in the district office. In Washington, D.C., that's where policy is made. That's where you introduce bills, we pass bills or amendments to become law, and we try to make people's lives better through legislation, through the public policy making process. In Washington, again, always a full slate of schedules, either meetings in the office, or committee meetings, floor votes or debates, speeches that you have to give. Again, full slate of things to do throughout the day. Never a shortage of things to do. You always, it's you probably both in the district or in DC. A lot of times I say you often have to say no to more things that you can say yes to, because the demands on the time are so incredible. But again, an incredible privilege to serve, and a great way to make a difference for people back home.
Well, it sounds like the drum just keeps beating all day long, from probably the second you wake up to the second you go to bed. And I love what you do. And so with those 20 years of service in Congress, I'd love to know like two pieces of legislation that have kind of really jumped out at you that you're proud of, and love to know why.
Yeah. Well, there's many pieces of legislation I could point to that I'm proud of, that either I sponsored directly, or that I co-sponsored or voted for. But I guess I'll if I'll just keep it to two or three, I will say first is the Lifespan Respite Care Act, which became law in 2006. And basically, the Lifespan Respite Care Act, um, it provide community based respite care services for family caregivers of children and adults with disabilities, or say aging parents that that need a little bit of help, just as give a break to the caregiver. And we often forget about the caregivers, and the situation where people are kept at home, which is a great thing if people can age in place, they can stay at home. But often the burden or the responsibility of caring for a disabled child, or an elderly parent, or a sick parent, or a child, is falls on the family members, and it's a lot of times it's uncompensated care. And yet the demands of the needs of the family still go on, and we need to make sure that the caregivers can take care of their own health and own the other family needs. So giving them a break is what lifespan respite care is all about. The other bill that I'm extremely proud of is the National Cyber Director Act, that became law in the uh, fiscal year 21 NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act. It's the one major piece of our cyber um, uh, uh, policy or people that was missing, that we didn't have a quarterback, if you will, on the field, that's kind of pulling all of our cyber policy together. And this is now a Senate confirmed position. And this individual, Chris Inglis, is the first person to be appointed as the National Cyber Director, former Deputy Director of the NSA. He's the principal advisor to the president, to President Biden, on all cyber issues, and is the person who really is the point person on pulling all of our cyber policies together, make sure all the the oars are pulling in the same direction, because cybersecurity is the national and economic security challenge of the 21st century. It's not an issue that's going away anytime soon, and really we need somebody at the helm like Chris Inglis, who has the skills and the policy authority now to have a better coordinated, effective strategy to execute. The last thing I'll say, I know that we try to limit it to two, but I'll give you one more that I'm extremely proud of, and that's my vote and my work in support of the Affordable Care Act. That bill was so monumentally important to millions of people, both then and now, because it ensured that we're covering millions more people with health insurance that previously didn't have it. We're making it more affordable for people who were struggling because previously to be able to keep health insurance even if they had it. And it changes over from a fee for service system to now that one that really compensates providers based on quality of care. At least that's the hope and the model that we've transitioned to. And it did things like eliminated families going into bankruptcy because of they exceeded their yearly or lifetime caps. It's not a perfect law, but my gosh, it really made a difference. And I was so proud to be at the White House with President Obama when he signed that bill into law.
Those three pieces of legislation are definitely impacting lives and saving lives and protecting lives and all the above. So it's just, no, again, just thank you for 20 years of incredible service. And I know for myself, when I was in law school, I had the opportunity to clerk for Senator Harkin on the Health Committee, and it was very cool to learn how he was impacted by disability through his family members and people that he loves, and basically he always tried to make sure that every piece of legislation that came through his doors had a disability component. I would love to learn more or get your take about why is it so important that representatives incorporate people with disabilities into their legislation.
Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned Senator Harkin. He's one of my heroes too, and what an amazing legislator he was, and a great person that he still is, and again, one of my personal heroes. So legislators hold the power to make change, and it's so important that they wield that power responsibly in favor of helping people live with disabilities live more active and independent lives. It's just so important. They're our voice and our vote in this policy making process, and it's so important that people with disabilities are heard, and that their needs are met wherever possible, so that we bring down barriers and open up doors for opportunities, so that we fully realize the promise of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is really the civil rights legislation of our time in so many ways, and it changed the lives of people with disabilities in countless ways, my own included. I often said, and I said this to President George Herbert Walker Bush when I was in the Oval Office with President George W. Bush, when George W. signed the ADA Amendments Act into law. And it was about 19 years or so after the original passage of ADA. And I had the opportunity to talk to President Bush's father. And I said to him, Mr. President, thank you so much for championing and signing the ADA into law. I said, without that law passing, I don't know that I would be serving in Congress. And I thank you. So ADA is an amazing piece of legislation, but we still have work to do to realize its full promise. And that's where legislators come in, right?
And I think I heard recently a story that you were telling about how you were able to get some modification done within Congress to be able to have an elevator put in or something to be the first congressman to. Or can you tell the story?
Yeah. So I was able to preside over the United States Congress thanks to two lifts that were put in the floor of the speaker's rostrum. That to the naked eye, you look at the rostrum, you can't see that there's a way to get someone that's a wheelchair user up to the top level of the speaker's rostrum. And now that lift system does exist, and so now people with mobility impairments are not shut out to presiding over and holding the one of the highest offices in the Congress, the highest office in the Congress, their speaker or speaker pro tem. And so I was proud that on the 20th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, that I was able to preside over the United States Congress, the first wheelchair user to preside over the United States Congress. So it was a historic moment for me, but I did it humbly on behalf of all people with disabilities, saying that, this is a glass ceiling today that has been broken, and nothing should stand in our way. People with disabilities have every right and ability to serve in the Congress, and I hope more people will run and eventually serve in the Congress. But great credit to Speaker Pelosi, because she was the one that made that happen, along with Majority Leader Steny Hoyer, of course, another champion and hero of the ADA and its passage. So, but it was an incredible honor and a privilege to serve. So that without those lifts, it was the kind of the last barrier that had to be broken to full service and inclusion for people with disabilities in the United States House of Representatives, on the floor of the House.
Well, thank you for being a part of breaking down that last barrier within the House. And with this being your last term and not seeking reelection for the second congressional district, I would love to know what you're thinking, or what you're telling your other colleagues in Congress, what they should be doing for people with disabilities over the next 10 years.
Yeah, and this was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make, and I hope it was the right one. But sometimes you just have to listen to that inner voice and realize that it's time to chart a new course. But the work continues, and I have to say, one of the things that still weighs heavy on my heart is that I've never felt like I've accomplished enough for people with disabilities. I wanted to continue to open up so many doors and bring down so many barriers, and I've done my part. I wish I could do more, and that's part of the reason I wish I was staying there longer, because I still want to continue to work on those issues. But I'll hopefully be able to work on them from the outside now, as an ordinary citizen, but has still the experience of having served in Congress. And I hope to stay in touch with colleagues to work on things, because we need to follow through on President Biden's call to do things like expand home and community-based services, so that all people with disabilities can receive the care that they need in the setting of their choice. It's just so important. And again, to continue to pass laws that help to realize the full promise of the Americans with Disabilities Act, to allow all people with disabilities to contribute their God-given talents and to live independently in their communities, and again, the setting that they want. Beyond that, though, we also need to reform federally funded means-tested benefits programs like Medicaid and SSI to encourage really and enable workforce participation in a more effective way. Right now, it's sad that too many people with disabilities, I believe, are discouraged from working because of the fear of exceeding their income and asset limits, and losing the very benefits that enable them to work or to live independently. That is such a frustration. We are depriving the nation of so much talent that people with disabilities could bring to the workforce, that could bring to society, because they're ostensibly incentivized not to work. And that has got to change. And that's one of the things that I lament. I wish that we were able to make more progress on that. But that's a work in progress, and hopefully to be continued to a time when we fix that.
It's exciting
And
the trends.
what's that?
It's exciting that some of the trends, though, of states taking on their Medicaid buy-in programs for workers with
Yes.
disabilities. Like Washington State just passed in the last 3 years legislation to expand the income and asset limits. The governor of New Jersey just lifted all income, asset limits, age limits, and spousal inclusion for workers with disabilities. So it's unfortunately, it has to be done on a state-by-state basis. It would be the dream and the holy grail if Congress could pass federal legislation for workers with disabilities, but
Yeah,
I don't know if that will
I
ever
couldn't
happen.
agree more. I couldn't agree more.
But if you had, I would love to know if you had one message for Rhode Island businesses, or really businesses anywhere across the U.S. What would it be, and why? Why should they be catering to workers with disabilities and people with disabilities?
they should be reaching out to and making it possible for people with disabilities to come into their businesses and shop and be one of their customers, because people with disabilities have money to spend, and let us spend it in your business. This is we it's economic opportunity there for businesses to expand their customer base. And if you're not making your business accessible or inclusive, you're depriving yourself of customers. And so if there's anything that the one thing that businesses really need more than anything else is customers, right? Without it, they can't do business. And so, this is an opportunity to expand their customer base. And catering to people with disabilities, only expands businesses' clientele. And so, and it's the right thing to do.
It is the right thing to do, and there's millions of people with disabilities and billions of dollars to back it up. So, and my last question, I would love to ask you, if you could have a conversation with anybody in the world, who would it be and why?
Well, throughout historical figures or people that are alive today.
Anybody. We could bring back anybody else from the past.
I Yeah, it would have to be FDR. How could I not be impressed with or hold up FDR as a role model? The extraordinary courage that he had, to both in his personal life and in his public life. And I find no small irony in the fact that in one of our nation's darkest times and difficult times, where the country was going through both the Great Depression and World War II, it was a man in a wheelchair who led our country through that dark time to the other side and gave birth to what we are now, a superpower in the world, and such an amazing country that has grown and thrived since his time. And I'd love to have a conversation with him on so many things, and talk about how he reached deep down inside himself, to put his disability aside, not that let it even get in the way, but to persevere and go forward, and he did.
That's an incredible person to speak with, and that would absolutely be a fun conversation. And I just cannot thank you enough, Congressman Langevin, for being on accessiBe's Spotlight session today. This was a great interview, fun time. I know our audience is loving every minute of this, but thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Josh. Great to be with you, and good luck.